You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live.
Hello, welcome to Garibaldi Red as Nottingham Forest season sits on a knife edge after the agonising 2-1 defeat to Newcastle United on Friday night. And joining me to discuss the game and the state of the Premier League relegation battle is, first of all, Reds fan Michael Temple. Temps, good morning, are you well?
Morning, Matt. Good, thank you.
Good. And delighted to be joined by former Reds manager, the manager of my second favourite Forest team after last season's promotion winners in Paul Hart. Paul, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Delighted to have you with us. You were both at the game on Friday. I couldn't watch it, so had the pleasure of watching it in full on Saturday morning, knowing the result, which was no fun at all, but happy to weigh in with some opinions. But first of all, Paul, as guest of honour, what did you make of the game before we come to the relegation picture? It's a painful way to lose a match, isn't it?
It is. You know, you look at the goals being scored so late on in both halves. It was hard to swallow. But, you know, unfortunately, in your first season in the Premiership, things like this happen. It's a hard place to be, and it's a cruel place. And you know, I think Nottingham Forest are doing very well. I've got to be honest. And you know, they hit the bar. We know that this is going to happen. You know, and Steve, I think Nottingham Forest are very fortunate to have a manager like him, in terms of his manner and the way he behaves and the body languages that he sends out. You know, they're very lucky, and him and his staff are doing a fantastic job. I've got to be honest. It's a terrible thing. The first season in the Premiership, you know, we've seen many times Norwich and Fulham and all that find it very, very hard. And you know, I don't think Nottingham Forest will be an exception to that. I think they will find it hard, but I've got a feeling, you know, that they have enough to crack it.
Yes, well, we'll come on to that in depth because it's also tied to the bottom. It's a bit of a mad season. I mean, on the game, Temps, was it one of those where Newcastle were the better side, but to me, Forest have got to be good enough to see that game out? As Paul said, in each half, you've got to be that bit smarter, haven't you?
Newcastle were by far the better side, and I think they clearly could have scored 3 or 4 times in that game. But once you go into injury time, trying to salvage a point, you can't make mistakes like the one that Niakate made. And we'll get into the nuances of the ones that went our way and the decisions that didn't go our way. But ultimately, we got to 90 minutes with a point in our grasp. And, you know, an individual mistake, which was punished in a really good game, cost us. And I hope it's not the point that ultimately costs us, because it's really, really tight down there. We, against the run of play, got ourselves into a decent position in that game, and that would have been an unbelievably good point given the run of fixtures we've got coming up now. So my abiding thought on that game is that the most crucial mistake was the one that Moussa Niakate made in injury time.
We'll get to that. Obviously, is the big talking point. I mean, on the team selection, Temps, basically the team was leaked early, which is not great for Forest's point of view. We were discussing it and felt it was a bit of a gamble. I spoke to Gary Birtles on Saturday morning, and he liked it and thought there was positive intent. How did you see that team selection with the change in formation to 4-2-3-1?
Yeah, I like the positive intent, and the chat within Forest was a realisation before this game they need 3 wins to stay up. So why not go for it at home and pick a team that's going to get us on the front foot? As it happened, we conceded a lot of possession. We still played with the deep block, and we couldn't retain the ball. And I think that this selection was designed to enable us, A, to retain the ball and build a meaningful attack every time we had a possession. But there's still that slight confusion that with this counter-attacking style and the need to use pace down the sides, we build very quickly. And in this instance, with a well-drilled Newcastle team, they just picked us off, recycled the ball for themselves, and we couldn't lay a glove on them for long periods in that first half. So I'm not saying it was a failed experiment, but there'll certainly be a lot of changes when we come back after the international break. I'm pleased that he proved that no one is beyond reproach. For me, Yatesy is the heartbeat of this side. Freuler needed to come out, having not offered enough in the games that he's played. And we saw a Brennan Johnson there who we didn't think was going to play and was probably 85% fit and not quite as effective as he would have been if he was at full strength. So, yeah, I liked it pre-match, but I know for sure he's going to change it when we play Wolves.
What did you make of the side, Paul, in general, playing? They had a 2 in midfield against a 3, basically. Is that a good idea, or did it feel like a gamble?
Well, I think at home you've got to try and score. I think you've always got to try and score a goal, give yourself a chance of scoring a goal. But I mean, they, Forest dropped one onto their number 4. I think that Newcastle are a pretty good team, and they've torn a few teams apart higher up than Nottingham Forest, and but I thought it was right to have a go and try and score a goal. You've got to give yourself a chance to score goals, no matter what. Unless you go to the Etihad and you're playing, or the Emirates, and you're playing a side that are as good as those two. But they were in a position to, as you just said, to get a point. And I think the biggest disappointment will be the way that Newcastle scored the goals.
I'll get Paul's take on Emmanuel Dennis in a minute, Temps. But we spoke about Dennis before the game and felt like maybe it was his time to shine. And to be fair, he's come up with a magic finish, hasn't he? What did you make of him overall?
Yeah, great finish, first of all. He was alert to what the defender was going to do. And the poise, just take that extra touch past the keeper and then almost lift it over Trippier, was an elite finish. No two ways about it. I think once again, though, it was a performance punctuated by highlights, and it ultimately left us really frustrated, didn't it? His record of production, by the way, when he started, is pretty good. I think he's got a couple of goals and an assist in 4 starts. So statistically, you could call for him having more exposure. However, when everyone's fit, when Taiwo plays, I think he offers far more in that position because of his physical presence as well. Took the goal very, very well, didn't he? That was the finish of a sharp striker, and he hasn't let us down when he started. I just think that with so many players becoming available for selection ahead of the next game, his place could still be at risk. But he was among the Forest players for me that had better games on Friday night. I still don't think we've seen a complete 90-minute performance from Emmanuel Dennis by any means. But he produced a finish which gave us a fighting chance in the game. And if we had have defended better and kept our cool late on, then we'd have been lauding him a bit more because his goal would have had an impact on the outcome.
So from a manager's point of view, Paul, what would you make of Dennis? Because he's a maverick and Forest fans, that he's growing on them, but they're quite frustrated by him. From a coaching point of view, would he wind you up because he doesn't really fit a tactical framework as well as other players, or do you take what he can offer and take it on the chin?
Well, I looked at him. I haven't seen very much of him, but I looked at him the other night. I thought he was aggressive, and he got up and down. He ran hard. He had ability, and players like that need a little bit of rhythm. So maybe this will be the start for him. He got about the pitch, and as you said, the goal was a cracking goal. So maybe he can play himself into the team.
Your mic's a little bit staticky, Paul. So I'm gonna remove you and then ask you to come back in and see if it fixes it. So hopefully it does. So I'll let you go, and you'll be back with us in 1 minute. Hopefully, I'll kick a question towards Temps. So just join us again in 1 sec. Right, hopefully that fixes Paul's mic. It's not too bad, but it's a little bit staticky. Just before Paul joined us and we move on, Temps, I mean, does Dennis get a run in the team now for you for a couple of matches after the international break until maybe Taiwo's back or Wood's fit again?
Well, he was limping for a long time after the game. We saw him about half an hour afterwards. He was still in his kit and having a bit of a hobble around. Hopefully, just an impact thing. And after a couple of days off and a bit of ice on there, he'll be back in there. Look, I like him as an option. I think he's different. We know he can produce when he has those moments. I think in my best Forest 11, Taiwo starts in his place, but he has a role to play from the bench.
Start me off in the midfield discussion while I bring Paul back in then. Does Shelvey work? That's the big question. It feels like good player, but maybe not at this moment. Shelvey
frustrates because I think he is the right player. There's for two reasons. A, that physical presence. He's a bit of a monster. He adds that he should be able to add that physicality, but he lacks a bit of intensity for me defensively. And we've seen a couple of examples where he's been a little bit passive, defending in his own box, not putting enough pressure on the player in possession, and it's cost us goals. What I like about him is his range of passing. It was a bit of a hopeful punt for the Dennis goal, but he can put the ball in the right area and he can execute things that few others in our team can. He's been shown to be defensively wanting though, hasn't he? And in the games that we're going to have, where we're going to win by one goal more often than not, it's so important that our central midfielders shield the back four as much as they possibly can. There's a lot of people in the comments giving Shelvey a bit of a kick in. I like the element that he brings, the vision, the range of passing, the experience, to a point, the leadership. I'm so frustrated by the lack of intensity without the ball. I just think it's something that's within his grasp to fix. It's not like a skill deficiency. It's a choice, isn't it? It's an intensity. It's a work rate. that thing that Yatesy has in abundance. So they've put Yatesy in maybe as a bit of a minder to let Shelvey have a bit less defensive responsibility in there. But for me, if he's going to keep his place in the team and bring the best of his game, he's got to adapt or overcome that weakness, which is just that slight clumsiness and lack of intensity defensively.
So Paul's back with us. Good to have him back. I think you would have heard all that, Paul, about John Joe Shelvey, the midfield balance, fans questioning Shelvey, particularly defensively, and whether he can play in a two. What do you make of his performance, and is he the kind of player you can carry in a relegation battle like this?
I think so, but probably in a three, a one and a two. He's a very good player, and he one or two of the passes he gave were other players wouldn't have seen those passes. He's got that little bit of extra, but probably with a 4 and 2 8s, it may look better, but. You can't argue with the fact that you're trying to score goals at home. So, and that's, I'm sure that will probably be changed at some point.
Is he a bit like, I'm trying to think of a comparison, maybe in terms, maybe like a Gareth Williams, someone who's brilliant on the ball, but not the most athletic and not the best defensive. Maybe I'm doing Gareth a disservice there. I'm not remembering how good he was without the ball, but is he that sort of player that maybe you do need in your midfield when you get him in the right positions on the ball, on the right parts of the pitch?
Possibly. I think you've got to let him when the team's in possession. He's got to be functioning, and you've got to give him his head to a degree. But I think you get a number 4 and Ryan Yates, then I think that looks a good balance.
Yeah, I mean, just talk to us about Yates. Does he look like he looks like a Premier League quality midfielder now, doesn't he? He's probably been Forest's best midfielder all season. In fact, I'm sure he has.
Well, he's he does in every league he plays. I saw him in League Two, and when we were at Luton, when he was on loan at Notts County and things like that. We've seen him in the Championship. He does similarly to Henderson at Liverpool. You know, he gives everything and plays the game simply. You know, which is the key to the quality of a top footballer.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear Paul comparing to Jordan Henderson. I've been doing that for years and people think I'm stupid, but yeah, I'm happy with that one. So, Temps, interesting what Paul says there about with a 4, which kind of reiterates what we've been saying. You think about Kouyaté being quite a missing link in this side that can complete the triangle in a sense if it is Yates, Kouyaté, and maybe Shelvey or Freuler.
Well, quick word on Yates, right? He's become the heartbeat of the side, and he has that the perfect attitude, that self-awareness that his limiting factors mean he has to be the fittest, the most energetic, and has to be everywhere to make an impact on a football match. And to see him carry that from the Championship to the Premier League has been brilliant for Forest fans. Kouyaté, I hope, can come back and be the player that he was before the injury that he suffered for Senegal, because I think with two minders, exactly how Paul describes, that can give more license and less responsibility to John Joe Shelvey. And also more crucially, hopefully get him on the ball further into that middle third rather than come in and dragging it off the fullback or the centre half and having to play from deep. So yeah, in my best midfield 3 would consist of Yates, Kouyaté and Shelvey, if that is possible after the international break, because we have to learn from this performance. We can't expect to restart an unbeaten run at home, which is only just ended, by the way. I think we were 9 unbeaten at the City Ground before we lost on Friday night. I think Kouyaté could be the enforcer that we need to get more of a foothold in games, because on Friday night, when we were frustrated, when we were without the balls for a long period of time, we just resorted to fouling them, and they had quality from every set piece. And eventually it told. But we need to be more organised than that. We need to be more disciplined. We need to make hard tackles and regain possession rather than conceding free kicks in our own third. And I think the experience of Kouyaté in the running could be crucial.
Before I come back to Paul, I was going to Paul about Gibbs White, but I just want to throw 2 more names at you, Temps, because you're obviously more for us to see that people are mentioning Mangala and Danilo as the other names. And people aren't actually saying Freuler as much now, but Danilo and Mangala as the third one in there, maybe ahead of Shelvey, or not for you?
I'm just with Danilo. I'm just thinking back to the frustration of the Leeds performance, where we saw those flashes of his physicality on the ball and how he was able to brush off the opposition, but allied that to how often he gave it away. And that was just him adapting to the pace of the Premier League after a long season in Brazil. I think when he gets back in the side, we'll see a better version of him, just because he would have become more adept to the intensity in training, more of a chance to understand what Cooper's trying to get across. And also, of all the signings, he's the one that struggles the most with the language. He has very little English, and being plugged into the side as he did early on would have been tough for him. Not making excuses, he has to adapt to that because his potential is huge, isn't it? I just think that with what's at stake, Cooper will turn first to the proven performers. Danilo will eclipse Kouyaté in years to come, but for me, the player for right now is Kouyaté. Other player you mentioned was Mangala. We have a good record. I think our points record of Mangala in the team is strong. He's again shown in 45-minute bursts that he can be effective. I think he's got more of an all-round game, perhaps, than one or two others who are in the side for a particular elite asset. So back in the Belgian squad as well. So there's obviously something been noted there about his form and fitness, which he struggled with in the first half of the season. He'll be a bench player for me in that crucial week after the international break. I don't think he'll start the first game back, but he'll get plenty of minutes between now and the end of the season.
Well, I mean, obviously you've been managing in Premier League relegation battles, Paul, so you're better placed than any of us to talk about this. Do you understand the mentality of Steve Cooper to go for the tried and tested of Shelvey over Danilo, who's a 20-year-old Brazilian who's obviously very talented but never played in this country? Do you kind of circle the wagons around the players you know and you trust a bit more in this situation as a manager?
Well, I was very fortunate at Portsmouth to have the caliber of player around me, full of experience, and what we had to do was, even great players get nervy and they need a bit of help now and again, and it was just how we approached it and talked to them and settled them down a little bit, and the key to the sentence I've just delivered there was experience, and I think you've got to use whatever you've got in situations like this. Shelvey's got Premier League experience. He's nerveless in terms of facing the big games, and I think you would always have to consider playing him, because with the best will in the world, I don't think there are many players at Nottingham Forest with Premiership experience. I might be wrong on that, but I don't think there's too much. And you've got to find it wherever you can. It's important.
The other player I want to get your take on, Paul, that feeds into this midfield debate, although he doesn't necessarily play in the midfield, and I'll ask Temps to say about that, is Morgan Gibbs-White. He's gone off the boil a bit of late. Do you see an elite level player in there potentially, Paul, or does he need to do a bit more?
He played like a number 10, didn't he, on Friday? I think he probably is better higher up the pitch. I liked that. I've only just recently started watching Nottingham Forest, so you have to forgive me a little bit. I was working up until January, so I saw them play. They played a little bit of a diamond with Brennan and Morgan up front when I saw them in the first couple of games, and they were a handful, quick, spinning off in between centre backs and full backs. Very difficult for teams to play against. But you've got to play to get two up front. You've got to know who you're playing against, and I wouldn't ever say that every game you can do it. But we're talking about Morgan. I think he's a useful player. I do.
The question I was going to ask you about Morgan, Temps, is a lot of fans are thinking that Chris Wood has detracted from Morgan in the team. I'm beginning to wonder, if we keep going on about Shelvey, but whether Shelvey playing the ball that bypasses Morgan is an issue that either Forest's going to have to overcome or Morgan's going to have to overcome if they're both going to be in the side. Do you think?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think the focus of the period just after the World Cup was getting Morgan Gibbs-White on the ball, wasn't it? And you're right. With Shelvey's range of passing comes occasionally bypassing him, because so many of our goals have been created by him beating the first man, having a broken field, and then slipping people in the right space. So that's fair, but the priority of other players isn't to make Morgan Gibbs-White tick, and it's for Steve Cooper to try and get a tune out of those combinations. I think Chris Wood's got a big chance of coming back into this side. I think one of the challenges we had in the early part of the season was being under pressure and clearing the ball to a front two of 5'10" quick lads who were never going to compete with Premier League centre halves. Taiwo got a bit of a grip, didn't he, and became more physical. Surridge had flashes, but the best of Chris Wood does that. I haven't personally seen yet what Andre Ayew's elite characteristic is, what he brings to this team that Chris Wood or a fit Taiwo or maybe even Sam Surridge doesn't. I think his place will come under immediate threat after the break, and we'll look to more than likely one of those two, either Taiwo or Chris Wood to be more disruptive than Andre Ayew has. I thought he had a relatively anonymous performance on Friday night, and he needs to do far more if he wants to keep that shirt.
Temps mentions Andre Ayew there, Paul. He was involved in the first goal, losing it in a bad area. I mean, Forest felt it was a foul. What was your take on the goal from a manager's point of view, and did you think it was a foul on the halfway line?
I think it was one of those where I don't know. It's, players fall over all over the place at the moment. I'm not accusing Andre of doing that, but by any stretch of the imagination, it could have been a foul. Yeah.
What about from there? Do Forest have to be better to see the situation out so close to half time?
Well, it's easy to say, and we all know that's what should happen. I do keep saying it. We're in the Premiership, and it's brutal. Good players. You're asking people to hold the ball. I saw Ayew play for Swansea, and he was arguably their best player. He up front in a 3, getting hold of it with his pace and everything. So I think it shows the massive gulf between the Championship and the Premiership, and how, if you can get it, you need the time to bridge that gap.
And
sorry, so I was going to jump in on that. It was a foul, right? It was a foul, but we didn't defend well enough after that. And we'll talk later about a decision which went our way. And I think it's a bad look crying about it on social media, as we did. And I think Steve Cooper was man enough in the press conference to say that wasn't the reason. There's no excuse. There's no barb at the ref in this game. We didn't compete enough. It was the right result on the balance of play. You can't hold on to those moments that go against you, because we all have this condition where we conveniently forget the bits that did go our way. And that was a massive let off for me. I don't want to talk about it now because now you're going to ask about it in a second. But we didn't lose that game because Andre Ayew was fouled. We conceded 2 goals which were avoidable. Simple as that.
Just before we come on to VAR and that goal that was disallowed, just on Isak, Paul, and the quality of the finish. I mean, he cost 65 million, 70 million quid, and you could see that quality in that moment. And he played very well against Wolves the week before. I mean, that's what you get at the top end of the Premier League with that kind of money, isn't it?
Yeah, he's a good player, no question. And they've also got a few years' experience of being in the Premiership. It means a lot, and you become hardened to the. I mean, they've got quality players. The right back's an England international still, and it's the goalkeeper is. I work with him at Charlton. He's unbelievable goalkeeper. These are top players.
Could you see he was going to... I'm going off on a tangent here. Could you see Pope was going to be that good, like that far down the levels in that early in his career?
Well, when he came in, he was playing under 21s, under 23s, where he was a good goalkeeper, as we know goalkeepers. Stopping shots. He stopped shots right away. He's improved his feet. He's worked really hard at that. But he saves them with his feet. I mean, there was I think the shot in the first half where everybody stood up and I missed it. I had to wait for the thing, but he blocked it with his feet. And that's what he does. He keeps the ball out of the net.
True. VAR then, Temps, as you mentioned it, I watched the goal back and I knew it had been disallowed, but I couldn't really see why until when I watched it initially. My dad was texting me during the game, like, disallowed for VAR, and I was like, oh, good. I watched it back. It's like, well, I didn't see anything there, so it looked a bit odd. Was it the right decision in the end, or did Forest massively get away with one?
I think we got away with one there. So I've heard a couple of refs and Gary Neville trying to interpret this rule. So it's offside because Felipe is deemed to have saved the ball rather than made a deliberate play. And that's the subjective bit which the ref is charged with making a snap decision on. For me, he adjusts his feet and he plays it with his instep. So it's a very deliberate action from Felipe to clear the ball. The rule seems to suggest that if that's a deflection, if it comes off his hip or whatever, then by the letter of the law, it's offside. Longstaff's in an offside position, but irrelevant if Felipe is said to have played the ball. So I think if I was arguing for this in the inverse, I would be, dejected and quite angry if that had made an impact on the outcome of the game. So yeah, weird rule, one that I wasn't aware of, but that's the one we got away with. So careful those that are out there blaming the ref for any kind of meaningful impact on this game. If we're going to discuss the Ayew incident, we need to look at this in the same light. And for me, they interpreted that wrongly. But you take that look, and we find ourselves at 1-1 through those circumstances, and still it becomes about concentration in that key moment that cost us later on. But yeah, there's an example of two bad decisions, if you like, evening themselves out.
So I don't know if you've got anything to add to that on that incident, Paul, but what's your take on VAR in general? You don't have it in the Championship when you've been working at Luton these last few years. Do you hate it when you see it in Premier League football, or are you on board?
I think it's made for a bit of drama, but you score a goal and you're waiting sometimes 3 minutes or something to get it. Just kills the mood a little bit. But there's been good or bad. There's been it still has a human element at the end, doesn't it? It still has to go to wherever it is, and there's a geezer there making a decision. So it's and we've found out that the chap, whoever's been there, have made mistakes. So, but I think overall it's okay. Somebody's got to explain to me what offside is, because I'm at a loss. It's first it was if your nose was offside, it would be allowed. This was a couple of years ago. Then it changes to any part of your body offside, your knee or anything. Sometimes I think maybe if you just say, just give them offside, so everybody knows where we are, because I think it's a lot of conjecture.
True. It's the same with handball as well. I have no idea what handball is these days anymore.
Ask Moussa Niakate, he'll tell you.
Well, yes, okay. Moussa Niakate, Paul, terrible error to concede that goal. I mean, the chap, he hadn't played since August because of injury. First 90 minutes, he hadn't played a 21s game or anything. Was that the symptom of a tired mind more than anything for you, having played centre-half at that level?
I mean, it's a possibility, but I mean, even when I played, when there were, two cameras and a man and a dog at the stadium, you're brought up to keep your hands away from the ball, mainly because as long as the ball's alive, there would be a chance the keeper might save it, somebody else might pull you out of the doodah and keep your hands away. It's a poor penalty to give away. It may be because of tiredness. I don't know, but the golden rule is you keep your hands down. And now, where there are cameras everywhere, you are never going to get away with anything.
No, I mean, we saw from his reaction temps, he knew what he'd done straight away. There's no denying it, is there? We'll come on to his performance, but you're not going to get away with that one, are you? That's a real, like Joe at Tottenham, that's a real gaff. He
knew straight away it was a penalty. And he's a player I was really excited about pre-season. Saw him in a couple of games, physically imposing, can play football, can find a pass. But we've seen him play in the Newcastle game where we got turned over opening game. He's come in and pulled his hammy, and by all accounts, not taken the recovery quite as seriously as he perhaps should have done. Re-injured himself in the process, come back and handball in the 93rd minute. So I still think that he will settle into this side and become a starting centre half, because he has certain qualities that some of the people he's vying with for that position don't have. But his body of work as a Forest player at the minute isn't all that impressive, is it? And we need to see the best of him in the running, because if Paul Hart is the gaffer of Forest and walks in after that game, the person he's calling out straight away is Moussa Niakate, because everything else pales into insignificance if you found a way to find a point. And because of that decision that he made to put his hand where he put it and defend the ball in that way, we've come out of a hard-fought game with nothing. And that will have an impact. I think the mindset going into the international break with a point in the bag is far more positive than the one that we find ourselves with now. It just grinded me, and I think it was totally avoidable. I think Cooper will have called him out, and I think he'll have apologised to his teammates, and hopefully be motivated to put it right on the pitch. But just a crazy decision from a player who should be doing everything he can to impress his teammates, his manager, and the supporters, and find a way to stay in the side. I was so disappointed with that moment.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I felt he did struggle in the game, and I think that's understandable because he hadn't played for so long. And I wonder if it was a gamble playing him the game before the international break with 2 weeks training. But I do think long term, as you say, he's going to be a regular in the side because he's got the raw materials for him and Felipe to be a good pairing, and we have to give him more time. He looks like he is a good player, but it didn't happen for him in this game, and he's got to front up. What would you have said to him afterwards, Paul? Temp said you'd have called him out. I mean, would you have called him out, or do you give him till Monday and then let him think about it and then call him out in training on Monday morning?
Be honest, Harty.
I'm a changed man. I think 20 years ago, I think it's important to address it. Whether it would have been addressed right afterwards, when it's not a good thing. It's not a good idea to sometimes, as a manager, to address things like that straight away. I'm not saying it's a bad thing either, but it's as non-committal as I can get.
Well, Des Walker wouldn't have needed telling, would he? But if a young Michael Dawson did that, you'd have taken him into the boot room and told him what for, I'm sure.
Well, if I can tell you a story, my first summer at Nottingham Forest as a player, and we were playing in a tournament somewhere in Holland, and it was at the other end of the pitch, but I ran in and it was going over my head and they were going to head it, and I put my hand up quietly, if you know what I mean, and flicks it off the head, but it also flicks off Gary Birtle's head as well. And the manager invited me to sit next to him if it ever happened again.
Let me ask you about another specific one, Paul. Actually, this popped up on Twitter yesterday. There was a game in 2002 where both Prutz, who we know well, obviously this podcast, and Jack Lester got sent off against Watford in the first half. I don't know if you recall it, but I remember Prutz saying he was terrified you were going to tear into him. I think it was even in the first half. Do you recall that game?
I don't. It was in the Championship, was it?
I think you lost 2-0 at home to Watford, and I've seen the video. Prutz got sent off for a leg breaker, and Jack basically stamped on someone's knee in the first half.
Oh, right. I can't remember that. And but both lads, well, you know them. They're great lads, and it's uncharacteristic of those two players to be sent off. I can't. I mean, I don't say this lightly, but I can't even be. My memory is not the same as it used to be, and I can't even be accused of heading it too much because I used to centre off, head the ball, and so anyway, they didn't mean it, and they were good boys.
Just back to Felipe and Niakate, Temps. you were felt Felipe played well. I felt it was all very harem-scarum and chaotic, and maybe that was because they didn't know each other and the one was covering each other's deficiencies. Well, I thought, like I said, Newcastle struggled and maybe Felipe was covering him. Am I being harsh on Felipe? And just in general, you think there is a good pairing there?
Yeah, this was I suppose our biggest disagreement, having both seen the game. Felipe, for me, was the most assured of the defenders. I think I was very surprised when Aurier was announced as man of the match in the stadium. It was Felipe for me, both for his doing the basics, heading and tackling, but also he did put his foot on the ball. He did drive forward. He did find a pass. He just looked more assured. His experience came to the fore in a game where it didn't for one or two others. So. Yeah, interested to see what the views are in the comments. But for me, Felipe was Forest's best performer on Friday night, keeps his side, and this place that's up for grabs is the one alongside him, because I think he's inked in for the rest of the season.
Yeah, people in the comments agree with you and disagree with me. I thought he was maybe a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10, not the 8 or maybe 9 that people are saying. Is he a defender you like, Paul? I know you haven't seen much of him, Felipe, but he's quite tough at the back and he loves a tackle. What would you say about him from what you've seen?
Yeah, I thought he did okay the other night. I find it, to speak in general terms, centre-backs, defenders, they don't deal with the principles of defending anymore. We see penalties in abundance in the Premiership, people diving in, not staying on the feet. We see people getting booked for tackles that look like they should be in the 1960s, but the reason they look so bad is because they're going to ground and it's lazy defending. So the principle of defending, stay on your feet and jockey and push them away, and it's and I've been working in academies for 30 odd years, and the one thing that I do teach are more than anything are the principles of attacking play and defending. And unfortunately, I feel that worldwide or whatever, we're missing the art of defending, certainly.
I mean, people in the comments agree that Felipe was our best player. So maybe I was wrong, but I'm a big fan of his. I think he's been the best of the January signings and been an excellent addition. But I think it felt like it was all a bit chaotic and on a knife edge in that game to me personally, but maybe it was a bit kind of not knowing the Akate so much and trying to forge that partnership. But still a big fan of his, certainly. Let's talk about the relegation picture in general then. I'll ask, I know Paul's quite confident. How are you feeling, Temps? I don't think I'm disclosing anything until by saying Mikey's very, very worried. Greg's Greg. I'm getting increasingly worried. It feels like it's hanging on this Wolves game ever more, and the path to staying up is getting narrower. How are you feeling?
I've booked the week off work from the 1st to the 8th of April, when we will play Wolves, Leeds and Villa in quick succession. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll just be hanging around my house like a school secretary in August, I'd imagine. But that week is going to define this season. There's a scenario in which Steve Cooper doesn't make it through that week, such as its importance and the pressure that we know exists at this level. However, it's also an opportunity to, restore the daylight that we had 3-4 weeks ago. And if we do beat Wolves on the 1st of April, that table will look a lot different. The feeling around the club will look a lot different. And I hope and pray, my target, as I've said for a long time, is that Steve Cooper becomes the first manager in a long time to start and end a season at Nottingham Forest. Those games are massive. They're teams in and around us, certainly in the case of Wolves and Leeds. Villa have got themselves away from that congested pack who are vying to avoid the drop. I'm confident in the sense I think it's more likely than not that we will stay up, but it's on a knife edge. And if you offered me 17th on goal difference right now, I'd absolutely bite your hand off. It's that tight. We've had some of the wind has come out of our sails, but we have this run of 3 games in a week, which will come to define our season and where it ends.
The bookies have it now basically 50-50. I think that Opta had it 50-50 basically. Forest have got Awonyi to come back, Kouyaté to come back, a fully fit Yates, hopefully, a fully fit Brennan, hopefully. So I can see signs of hope, but it is very worrying at the moment. I mean, Paul, are you still got belief that this team can stay up?
Well, I think I like, and I've always encouraged, for instance, Nathan Jones to, when we went back in 2.5 years ago, we were dead and buried in the Championship, and we managed to stay up by, I don't know, easily. And it's targeting games where you've got to be honest and say where you can get a point from, how you set up for a point, and goals. I think there's enough below us that are going to have a struggle as well. And I think that I don't know whether it's 36 or 38 points. It may be around that sort of area where it's that's where we need to be pitching.
How do you stop the players feeling the pressure then? Because this Wolves game, it does look must win. I don't know if it is or not in your mind, but how do you address that with the players so they don't walk out at 3 p.m. and totally bottle it? What would the message be?
Well, I don't think you talk about it in that respect. Mental strength is an important part of being a professional footballer, and dealing with these situations is not all about the manager. It's I think that Steve won't be creating a situation around the club that's nervy and on edge, and he'll be giving them the tools to get a point or 3 points, whatever's necessary. But I do think that Southampton, Bournemouth, Everton, there's a number of clubs there that are going to find it hard as well.
Yeah, there's an interest. The fixtures are so interesting. I mean, Forest look rough on paper. Leicester on paper have got the easier games. Palace have got the easier games. I mean, another one of your former clubs, Paul. If you're a Palace player this morning without a manager, are you worried as well?
I would be. I found that a strange parting of the ways, to be honest. But yeah, I'd be worried, because who are you going to bring in? I don't know. It's somebody who's maybe not tried and tested, or another foreign coach, which, well, I don't know. I think they'll have problems.
I should just ask you briefly about Chris Cohen and Nathan Jones. You know them so well. You feel for them? It was a tough job going into Southampton. It didn't work out. You have to commiserate with them, I guess, don't you, as a friend of theirs?
Yeah, it was a very difficult situation. Southampton brought in quite a lot of players in the summer that were hadn't got any experience whatsoever in the Premiership, and the previous manager, Hasenhüttl, found it difficult. There was no reason to believe that a new manager would find it any more easier. But it's been a sobering and testing time for them. They've debriefed and and they're very good. The bottom line is they're very good. We all know Chris from Nottingham Forest, and he's been absolutely brilliant at Luton Town. Nathan's, he's got to have a look at things and reassess. But I've got faith in both of them. I think they'll come back.
Just looking in the comments, one thing that there's a West Ham fan called Kieran in there who says he's panicking as well. I just think like there's so many unknown variables at the moment about when we're going to play these teams, and people are saying about, oh, you can write off Man U and Arsenal and Chelsea. I wouldn't do that because, you know, look at Spurs, for example. A couple of weeks ago, you didn't want to play Spurs. I'd love to play them tomorrow. And Everton are next, which is a bit annoying. So you're going to play teams in different situations. I think it's a bit pointless kind of predicting how we're going to get points off here and there as fans. Much as we'd love to find a scenario we get 15 points or might end up with 6 points, I think we just have to wait and see at the moment. These next couple of weeks are going to be essential. One thing I just want to put to both of you quickly, which is a reasonable question that people are asking. Mark, in the comments, a few fans are starting to question Steve Cooper tactically, and in terms of if he's the right man for the job. Paul, and you obviously think he is 100% still from what you were saying at the start about Forest lucky to have him?
I do, yeah. I think Nottingham Forest are very lucky to have him. He's very rounded, very calm, and I think right there and up for the job and up for the challenge that's in front of him. You know, he's him and his staff have done an amazing job since they came in, and the change from Championship to Premiership. It's what everybody wants, but it's no picnic, and you know, you need consistency and belief. You know, and I think he's done a great job and will continue to do that sort of job.
And Temps, just before we finish, 2 questions quickly. I mean, you're still on board with Cooper, and the other one I was going to ask was, do you see confidence in this team starting to erode a little bit in terms of the performances haven't been great? Is that a concern? I was going to ask you, going into the Wolves game, do you feel like they've got to get this win quickly, otherwise they are going to be an even bigger bother and it starts looking a bit desperate?
I'm still firmly behind Steve Cooper. I remember the situation that he inherited, and he's engineered a position where we've got a more than realistic chance of staying in the Premier League, which would have been absolutely unthinkable the day that he walked into our club. However, the ownership are not going to let him take us down. And I think, I doubt they would let him get through that week when we come back after the international break with any less than 4 to 6 points without asking some kind of question. That's for them. Me, as a Forest fan, firmly behind Steve Cooper. I remember a line that Harty trotted out when he was being touted by other clubs when he was doing well at Forest. He said, it's a fickle business and you're soon forgotten. And unfortunately, in football management, that is absolutely true. It's on to the next one. And before you know it, they get a win and you're buoyed by being in the moment and their plan to improve things and to garner a turnaround. Confidence. I mean, look, we're looking at our situation, but we've talked about 5 or 6 other clubs who are equally bereft of confidence. We've had a wobble. We had a really good run where we put back to those back-to-back wins against Leeds and Southampton and got ourselves into a nice situation. I think we've since taken 2 points out of a possible 18 and are feeling a little bit sorry for ourselves. Beat Wolves, that flips, momentum changes, and we're back on the surge. I just hope that we can get a result in that game, because that will settle the Cooper debate and it will settle the confidence issue in the course of 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think like that game feels ever more essential with teams around Forest digging in a bit and picking up points here and there. That Forest need to do that as well and go to Leeds and go to Villa and get something. But that's a question for another day. Just before we go, then a couple of minutes, Paul. You said you've only started watching Forest recently, so you've been at Luton. What's happening with you at the moment? You finished up at Luton. What's your future looking like in the game, do you think?
Well, I put my notice in at Luton just to clear everything up. When Nathan left and went to Southampton, I put my notice. I was doing the academy for the last 12 months, so I restructured that and got everything in place. So I felt it was probably the right time for me to bow out. Plus, 100 miles a day is not easy on a 70-year-old. So, but I don't know. I've not said I'm retiring, but this wonderful game has a habit of telling you when to retire, and maybe it's knocking on the door. I don't know. We'll see.
Is that, and it finally, is that quote Temp said, regurgitating yourself, is that ever more true about it's a fickle game?
Absolutely. Well, it is, and the first, with Chris, you mentioned Chris and Nathan before, and, it's a tough world we live in. And if you want to be a manager, you got to be prepared to take some kicks in the nuts.
Another immortal quote.
I'll clip that up for Twitter. Temps, before we go, any other business, anything you want to add?
I was just going to say, I really enjoyed that Harty team as well. That combination up top in particular, when Darren Huckabee came in on loan, playing behind Marlon and Jono, it was just great to watch. And never have I been so heartbroken as that second leg at Bramall Lane. I was a student living in Diggs on Bramall Lane and managed to get myself in the lava stand. So I was just surrounded by blades as that tie unwound. But that attacking intent and the way that side was built with a core of academy lads and bringing in lads like Jono and Marlon, Jono and Darren Huckabee, just a great season, and still got fond memories of that.
Yeah, I've never felt sick at a game. I hope I don't feel like that again. I imagine it still stings for you even now, Paul.
Yeah, I was going to say you should have been where I was. It was yeah. And I think, it's amazing. If you remember who was the referee in the first game? Klassenberg. He sent off Dorse in the 65th minute or something like that, and that was his first foul in the game, and he sent him off. And then, so we missed Dorse for the second leg, but John Thompson came in, and if you remember, he was brilliant. He did another academy player. He did brilliantly, and alongside Des, and I think 0 up after a period of time. Going into extra, we're still creating chances, But listen, what a wonderful club! How fortunate am I to have been a part of Nottingham Forest as a footballer, back in as a coach for a year with the gaffer, and as a academy manager and a manager. Blimey, doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, you've been a fine servant. Just quickly, any other business from me? Now, I promised Greg that I'd give out a fancy Premier League update. I don't imagine you play fancy Premier League, Paul, but I'll give a quick update on our league. So 1,600 teams. Top at the moment is Simon Huff, 1,866 points. That's mental. And then I'll read out the rest of the top 10. Alex Mellows, Tom Rowley, Kate Howe, Joe Henry, James Coleman, Andy Hillier. Greg's mate, Christian Moody, the reason I'm doing this update, is in 8th. And then Matthew Neal, 9, and Joe Need in 10. I think I'm like 130 or something, so I'm doing all right. I won't say where Temps and the other lads are, but I thought I'd give out that update. And a film recommendation, because people ask me for them, which is mad. Ready or Not, recommended by Mikey, and that's on Disney+. It's called Ready or Not. Right, we've been going for an hour. Temps, thank you very much.
Cheers, fellas.
Thanks for everyone who's watched along, and do like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and spread the word. It's very much appreciated. Paul, I've got to say thank you very much as well. It's great hearing about the team of 2003 and your opinions on today. So hopefully you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good stuff. Right, have a good week, everyone. We'll keep going through the international break. We've got a few interviews and other bits and features. Then we're back with a preview of the Wolves game. And God, let's hope Forest win that one. But that's for another day. So thanks very much, everyone. We shall see you soon.